o'clock, we're going to call the meeting to order. We do have some items we want to add on to the agenda, and you have them in front of you. The 3 DRI invoices that have not been added. They were added subsequent to the posting of the agenda, so we're adding it now. We don't have an agenda item approved, but I want to let you know. Okay, so on public comments on closed session, since there's not really a lot of public here, we will just say if you have anything you want to say it now. Okay, then we will go into closed session. And Bob, can you introduce your replacement to us before I'll have him do it in open session, but I mean out there. But would you do that now so everybody knows?
Aaron Steinwand, the Deputy Director for the Inyo County Water Department is...
Where are you going?
I'm retiring.
What?
Yeah.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
Yeah. I call BS.
That's in the minutes right there.
Yeah, I got it.
You got it.
So Aaron, you may be seeing more of that.
Okay.
The capacity that I'm here now.
Good. Okay. So you're all coming in. Are we bringing Aaron in with us in closed session? I don't have any problem with it. Does council have any problem with it?
Let's ask you.
Well, you're allowed to bring in necessary personnel, so if we...
I believe that's not inappropriate. If anybody thinks it's inappropriate, say so. Okay, you come on back with us.
I have to kill you.
Okay, let's go.
Good to go.
So Chuck, you're here for beer?
Yeah.
Missing San Bernardino County. Let's get everybody back up here, please.
Yes, she does. She does. I'm looking at a lot of the groups. She's from the same little group that Brian was. So really happy.
Yep. Okay, one more.
The Hernandez group. Yes.
Okay, we're missing one. San Bernardino County. Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. He'll be here very shortly. We are going to call it back into closed session. And Dave, would you lead us in the pledge, please? So I'll stand.
Here's the flag. Please stand over your right hand over your heart. Call after me. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Please be seated. We are going to have a presentation. Is that coming first still?
Yes, it should. We have Sam Bolin-Brin from the State Water Resources Board to come up and make a presentation. And I do believe we'll have a colleague, Natalie Stoke, will be calling in. I think she should be on the line now if she's not. So Sam, if you want to come up, the clicker's up there, and we can get you prompted and you get going.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
We can, and thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having me. So my name is Sam Bolin-Brin, and I oversee the State Water Resource Control Board's role under the implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. With me today, in the room actually, is Natalie Stoic. We're going to be sharing the presentation. And then on the phone is Nicole Kenzie, and she is going to help with some of the question and answers if we need her help. Sometimes she's good with an answer. But anyway, I'm going to go over a quick overview of some points you already know, just generally on SGMA, and then we're going to dive into the State Water Board's role specifically and kind of how our process works and looks like. I was here a couple of years ago, and we've kind of refined things a bit and have some more thoughts on how we're going to move forward with our process, only if we need to. It's kind of the big reminder there. And the reason I give that reminder is that the whole premise of SGMA is that groundwater management is best accomplished locally. This is kind of a cornerstone of the statute, and there's a quote from Governor Brown kind of recognizing that. And so that's kind of something the State Water Board also takes to heart, that really the implementation of SGMA is at the local level, and the board is just meant there to be there as a backup plan. Locals are kind of the main actors, groundwater sustainability agencies. I do want to make a distinction with the other actors in SGMA. The Department of Water Resources, or DWR, has really the big heavy lift at the state level, and they are different than the State Water Board. I always have to kind of remind folks of that. Their role is to set up the framework for SGMA, and so they've laid out regulations for what has to be in these plans that local agencies like yourself will develop. They also set up processes for how to define the boundaries and things like that, which basins are what priority. So really all of the nuts and bolts to get the process started. The State Water Board is separate from that, and that's where Natalie is going to kind of describe that in more detail, but we're kind of seen as the enforcers or the backup plan to the local efforts. The overall process is form agencies. Everyone did that really well. These agencies are developing plans, as you all are, developing a groundwater sustainability plan. There is this expectation to implement the plans, and I know that can be different than some other plans. There's kind of 5-year check-ins through the process to make sure, where the state will make sure that locals are following through in the commitments they put into their plans, and that the results are there. And so it's really meant to be an outcome-based process where through these 5-year check-ins you're showing the basin is responding, what we're doing is working, and the locals kind of know the plan is working as they thought it would. And then over 20 years you'll reach sustainability. And so this is kind of the finish line, 20 years from when the plan is implemented. And that's really the target here. So it is a 20-year process to reach sustainability. What is sustainability? I know this term is really nebulous. The statute narrows it down to essentially avoiding undesirable results. And I'd kind of be happy to help talk through this more specifically in the question and answer. But really, there's 6 things that have to be avoided. Y'all probably don't have to worry about seawater intrusion, but you likely have to worry about some of these others, like lowering of groundwater levels. The thing that makes one of these 6 items an undesirable result, though, is that the text is hidden behind there, so I'll just read it. It has to be significant and unreasonable. And it has to be caused by groundwater conditions occurring throughout the basin. So it has to be something negative that is significant and unreasonable, and it's caused by groundwater conditions. That's really what makes it an undesirable result. Avoid these 6 undesirable results within 20 years, and you're considered sustainable. The way you kind of articulate what is sustainability is through the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. There's a lot in these regulations that the Department of Water Resources developed. However, I kind of boil it down to these 4 pieces. That you have to characterize your basin, know what the groundwater conditions are, the physical setting, the conceptual model, all these pieces. Next is the sustainability criteria. This is a term the Department of Water Resources developed. And really what that means is you're defining what an undesirable result is, and then you're also defining where you want your basin to be relative to those undesirable results. So you'll set things like minimum thresholds, and those thresholds for water levels will say this is an undesirable water level, and then you'll set a measurable objective, and that'll show here's where we prefer water levels to be and what we're going to operate the basin to. You have monitoring to show where you're going to measure these sustainability criteria, as well as just generally how the basin is doing. And then the big piece is projects and actions, and this is the part of the plan where you're demonstrating to the state how you're going to get to the finish line. So there's all types of things could fit in there, new infrastructure. I know a lot of people are kind of looking at allocations and how to do pumping reductions. Likely it's going to be a suite of all of the above in a lot of the basins, just because I know that it's not going to be easy for everyone to reach sustainability. This is where I think the projects and actions are going to be one of the keys in these plans. Kind of mixed in throughout all of these, though, all of these pieces, and the process to develop all of these pieces is the need to consider the users of groundwater in the basin. And I know that kind of seems obvious, but it is laid out in the statute, and it's kind of a critical piece. You can't really know what is sustainable and what you consider significant and unreasonable without talking to your stakeholders and the users of groundwater within the basin, just like you're not going to know which projects are going to work or not, or where you can monitor things like that. And so I have this nice slide with some puzzle pieces. The statute uses the term beneficial users. There's really a number of users in the basin, and these are kind of the suite of people that the GSA and all of you are actively engaging in, it sounds like, through these process and the good participation of the meetings. One I wanted to kind of call out for this basin specifically is the military services, the Navy. Your basin is a bit unique that you have a very large base in the basin. It's likely going to be, and is, an important kind of stakeholder and beneficial user. I see that you have an ex officio member on the board. In some other basins, I actually do point to your area as a model, that you're kind of proceeding thoughtfully on this process of how to engage different stakeholders, but also the ones that are a little more complicated to engage with because of their role as federal entities. So getting into that process a little more, though, I think there's some important considerations when you're thinking about how to engage with beneficial users, and even specifically the Navy, that there's this really complicated intersection of state laws and federal laws that's really case specific. I have to give kind of an asterisk here that I am just a humble engineer. I know a lot of engineers get accused of being armchair attorneys, so I try to avoid that. But even from my kind of layman perspective, there are I can tell it's complicated, but I know that I can also tell that there's some few kind of key takeaways, and I had them kind of on the bullet points here. One, and these are kind of pieces from the statute that I'll go through in subsequent slides, but the Federal Reserve water rights are respected in full, as called out in the statute. Federal agencies are generally immune to regulation. This is where I say the word generally, because, as I said, it gets a bit complicated. But generally speaking, state and local agencies aren't able to regulate or tax the federal properties. However, I think the most interesting one where you guys are kind of a model is these options for agreements and voluntary participation. So these are just some quotes from the statute that I think are really helpful with the citations. But to the extent authorized under federal or tribal law, this part applies to a tribe or the federal government, including but not limited to the United States Department of Defense. And so this part is referring to SGMA, and that's kind of the quote there. And the part where I kind of noodle a bit is to the extent authorized under federal law. And that's where I think we have lots of smart people to work through what that really means in terms of what is allowed to apply to the federal law. There are kind of some clarifications of that in these subsequent sections of the statute. It says kind of when managing the groundwater basin, the GSA or the board, so that's the State Water Board in this case, when we're managing or you're managing, the federal reserved water rights should be respected in full. And then the piece that I think is also important to remember is that within the same pieces of sections of statute, it recognizes that the federal government can voluntarily participate. And so there's agreements that's certainly allowed. And so there's a lot of room for opportunity there to think through how GSAs are given kind of their certain authorities, pretty broad authorities in SGMA. And then the federal entities that where those GSA authorities don't necessarily apply can coordinate through these agreements and work through kind of a collaborative model or a coordinated model. And that's why I have this nice, to bring it back to the puzzle pieces slide, there's this importance of coordination in SGMA. And so in other more complicated basins, you have many, many GSAs all coordinating together. But that's not kind of the only type of coordination that's going to be important in SGMA. There's also just coordination among the various stakeholders and users within a basin, as well as the different types of entities in the basin, like the federal government and the cities and counties. Kind of weaving all that back together, the key pieces are adopting a plan, making sure you talk to everyone in the basin, and making sure that plan has all the pieces that are possible. And who's going to be kind of evaluating that is the Department of Water Resources. This is kind of their GSP review process. You're in the stage right now of developing the plan. You'll adopt that and submit it to the Department of Water Resources. And they've laid out in their regulation criteria that they're looking for. The first piece is that the plan is complete. And then so that's kind of the first round of evaluations they're doing. And then they're moving from there into more of a qualitative review. And in the regulation, they lay out kind of these 10 criteria that are almost, I don't want to say guiding principles, but it seems like they're laying out clear markers of this is what they're looking for in the plans in terms of the qualitative review. And these are things like, are you using best available science? Are you, did you set good sustainable management criteria? And then do you have the financial kind of ability and legal authority to implement the things you're planning to implement? And then this projects and actions. Did you lay out projects and actions clearly and feasibly in a way that's going to address the problems in your basin? And so I can follow up with the specific reg citation, but I think that's a really useful one to just kind of read into what the Department of Water Resources is looking for in the plans. They'll evaluate it. They decide whether or not it works or not. Natalie will get into a bit if it doesn't work. But then every 5 years, the implementation of the plans is evaluated by the Department of Water Resources. And so there's interim milestones that will be laid out by you to say here's where we'll be each 5 years. And then the department will essentially be checking against those milestones. So this is the process. There is kind of this recognition, though, that if that process isn't going according to plan or if one of those pieces doesn't happen, the legislature recognized that the state needed to be able to act in the absence of local success. And that's really where the State Water Board comes into play, and I refer to us as the backstop. And that's where Natalie's going to go into a couple more details.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about the State Water Board's role in SGMA. Some people call us the backstop. And before I dive in, I just want to go over some of the basics here. So the board only steps in when local efforts fail. That means that we can't step in whenever we want to. We will, or the State Water Board will temporarily protect the basin until locals come up to speed. The State Water Board's program isn't meant to cover the basin indefinitely. And the backstop is triggered by SGMA deadlines. So that's why everyone's focused on these deadlines right now, because that's what defines when the State Water Board can step in with intervention. So triggering the backstop, what are the triggers? The first one was in 2017. Everyone had to form their GSAs. You all in this basin did that and sailed past this deadline. In 2020, that's what we're looking at right now. All of the critically overdrafted basins have to prepare their plans and submit them to DWR. The next one coming up is 2022, when all the other basins subject to SGMA have to prepare their plans and submit them to DWR. And 2025 is kind of an interesting trigger in that the State Water Board can't use its authorities under SGMA to address surface water depletions until the 2025 deadline. So right now I'm going to focus in a bit on 2020. That's what we're all concerned about right now. And so first, what is the backstop and what is the process of intervention? So first there's the trigger, which I spoke of. The next step, if intervention is triggered, is the basin could possibly go into probation. If this happens, there's some time for the locals to fix issues. And if the issues aren't fixed, then the board will prepare and implement an interim plan. So avoiding the backstop. The statute gives 3 options for avoiding the backstop under SGMA. One is 1 GSA and 1 plan. I understand that's what you're doing here. The other option is multiple GSAs submitting 1 plan that covers the entire basin. And the last one is multiple GSAs and multiple plans. So what happens if intervention is triggered and the basin goes into probation? The first thing that happens is there's an opportunity to fix issues, as I said before. For instance, if some maps weren't submitted, there will be some time you can submit those maps. Or in a basin with multiple GSAs, if there's a coordination agreement that's missing, then there's some time to go ahead and get that submitted. In the meantime, the board will collect information so that if the board needs to prepare a plan, we can do that. So all pumpers will report. The board will conduct investigations if it needs more data in order to write that plan, and we can also require metering. So a little bit more about the reporting process. It starts with us identifying extractors in the basin, notifying them of reporting requirements. Then we'll collect the reports, review them, and collect fees. So I'll talk a little bit more about extraction reports here. So these are reports that have to be submitted annually, and they have to be filed online. In the reports, we will need information on where wells are located, how much they can pump, how much is actually pumped on a monthly basis, where the water is used, and what it's used for. So we've got an online form. It's a few pages long, and it's not too complicated. And the most important part is that we've got a map-based system so that when someone logs in and does their reporting, the report will ask the well owner to click where the well is located and to click where the water from the well is used. So the statute requires us to collect fees to cover the cost of our program. So all reports have a fee associated with them. There's a base filing fee of $300 per well, and the volumetric rate for a basin in probation is $40. There's an automatic late fee per month of 25%. There's a little star next to probation, and that's because if the board needs to conduct special studies to get more information to write a plan, the cost could go up. Also, if there's complicating factors like the board having to go through CEQA with writing in it, well, the board does have to go through CEQA to write a plan, but CEQA and costs of litigation, if that's occurring, we would still need to recover those costs as well, so that $40 value could go up. So back to the backstop. So going through the process, there's a trigger for intervention, the basin could go into probation, and there's an opportunity to fix issues. If those issues aren't fixed in time, then the state will write and implement the interim plan. So what is an interim plan? There are 4 key components. The first one is corrective actions. There will be monitoring to determine that those actions are working, or measure that they're working, a schedule for the actions, and the plan is subject to CEQA. So there's 2 types of corrective actions. Sorry, there's 2 options for corrective actions. There's physical solutions and demand management. Physical solutions are projects that increase supply in the basin. Here are a few listed: stormwater capture, developing new local supplies, water imports, desalination, and there's plenty of others. Demand management is decreasing demand through pumping restrictions. So when it comes to corrective actions in an interim plan, physical solutions may not be appropriate, especially because these plans are supposed to be temporary. They're not the same as a GSP or a groundwater sustainability plan. So it's probably not feasible for the State Water Board or for us to, provide desalination under an interim plan. What's much more likely and what's probably going to happen in writing interim plans is demand management. And the statute is clear that this is an option for us. So avoiding the backstop. As long as you follow one of these 3 options, you avoid the backstop, our authorities aren't triggered. And you're going for the 1 GSA, 1 plan, which is the simplest one, and that's great. And we understand that you guys are working diligently to do this, and everything I've talked to up to this point it's all theoretical. So as long as you submit your plan and it's approved by DWR, then our authorities aren't triggered. So going back to where we started, groundwater management in California is best accomplished locally. So the key to success in SGMA is local control. And a big part of that is going to be coordination and working with all of the groundwater users in your basin. So we want to see you be successful, and we're here to clarify any questions you have. And yeah, so Sam and I are happy to take questions.
What I'd like to do first is ask the board if they have or staff have any questions, open it up to the public, and then come back to the board or staff. So board, staff, any questions, please? Okay, then we'll open to the public, and then we'll come back to the board. Public, do you have questions?
You
can stand wherever you like. Judy Decker. It's not really, it's sort of a question and a comment. And in your discussion of demand management, you stated that you would assess all the wells in the valley. In our valley, there are only a portion of the wells that are metered and recorded, and those are the ones that are on the Indian Wells Valley Water District system or the ones on the Inyokern CSD system. The question I have for you that I'd like you to answer, because it's the problem that the board faces also, is how would you go about metering and measuring private wells? There are a lot of domestic private wells in this valley there are small and large agricultural wells in this valley, and there are mutual wells in this valley. They all sit on private property. How would you go about doing that?
So how we'd go about it is we'd write it into this probationary designation. The statute is pretty clear that it's here are certain things we can require when we do this, what is essentially an order that comes from the State Water Board, which is my 5-member board. And what the statute lays out is the pumpers will be the ones to install the meters if we require it. And so what we would do is we wouldn't physically be the ones putting the meter on the wells. We would just kind of require the well owners to do so. And I know it's private property, but this is it's a common good that those folks are relying on. And part of the process is that the legislature made sure we had all the tools we needed to properly manage the basin if we had to. The key piece for us is I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but in our other programs administered by the State Water Board, we have kind of different enforcement authorities. And so in the surface water world, the board has kind of been using these authorities for a long time now. And so we'd probably model some of the things from there. But the key piece is that if well owners, if we believe meters are important and necessary for good data to manage the basin, that we use our enforcement authorities to make sure that folks installed the meters. And so these are fines like I think it's $500 a day and things like that. That being said, we want to make sure that we're moving forward in the most practical way possible. Right now, we think meters are the best way to get good data in case we had to manage the basin ourselves. As Natalie touched on, our process is temporary, so we're not kind of designed to stay in place forever. And so if we go through with the metering program, really our goal there is to get good data and hand it over to the GSA. And we think meters could be the most helpful. Big and small users, most likely.
I'd like to ask a question, add on that to what Judy said. Are you going to require that of de minimis users also?
I'm not sure if we'd need de minimis users to start. I think that's something we'd have to evaluate as we're investigating the basin. Because de minimis is such a small amount of water that you can get in the ballpark with other estimation methods. That being said, if there's a ton of, if we kind of move forward in a basin, we find out there's just thousands or hundreds or thousands of de minimis users, and they're having a significant impact on the water budget for the basin, it is going to kind of make sense to get better data from them.
Right, next question, please.
I just wanted to find out if the presentations
please identify yourself?
Sorry, yeah, my name is Raj. I'm a citizen living in Ridgecrest. I just want to find out if the presentations are going to be made available somewhere that we can access them.
Yes.
Thank you.
That was easy. Thank you.
My name is Sophia Merck. Everybody calls me Sam. Some of the dominant, and I can never say that word, anyway, the small users are part of a disadvantaged community, and they do have problems in being able to afford meters and to be able to have somebody install it. Is there any provisions for the DWR to help with those dominant users?
You're good, Sam.
So at this time, we haven't identified any provisions to help DACs with metering. However, we would like to know if there are going to be issues, and we can talk to them and see if there's any options or any funding available out there. So we haven't identified anything right now, but that's something that we can think about.
Would that include money to buy and install and read? Is that something that you are looking at in your provisions, perhaps?
We haven't looked at that at this time for DACs.
So you're open to suggestions? Or you're going to come up with them yourself?
We're open to having conversations about it
Okay.
and looking at that going forward. However, if it's mostly de minimis users, as Sam said, at first we might not be focusing on de minimis users at the start.
Thank you.
My name is Wes Katzenstein. My question is, if you are forced to take temporary emergency restrictive actions, and we are severely overdrafted in this basin, have you put any thought into what kind of priorities you would use in allocations? For example, would there be a basic allocation that might cover health and safety for all persons in the valley, and then above that you might allocate water, or perhaps you might try to do some assessment of water rights, which might be a tough assessment, and allocate based on that. So my question is, what approach would you use in establishing temporary emergency allocations, or has that known yet?
So that's one of the requirements the statute places on us, is our plan has to be consistent with water rights priorities. What that means, as you touched on, is a pretty complicated question, but that's something we're going to make sure the plans do. So it probably limits our flexibility to do like specific carve-outs and things like that. But as kind of the attorneys in the room are probably more familiar with, there's a big process with working through water rights priorities perfectly. I don't think we're going to get it perfect. I think we're going to, because we're temporary, we're trying to get it as close as we can given the time we have, because we want to act quickly. But that's kind of the constraint the statute lays out.
Donna Hawker, Association of Realtors Office. I'm just curious, after the election that we have a new governor coming into office, if you anticipate any shift in the current legislation either way.
I wouldn't presume to read his mind, but what I've heard is that SGMA is kind of staying the course. A lot of folks recognize that it's a critical piece of legislation with a long timeline, and it's helpful for everyone to kind of stick to the process. And that's kind of what I've heard from all fronts so far in the different branches of government, is that we need SGMA, and it's here to stay in its current form.
Okay, any other public questions or comments? Wow, you guys surprised me. Okay, board, staff, comments, questions? Mick?
Thank you. Sam, so the first deadline is January 2020, where we have to have a DWR approved plan submitted. Okay, so that's it. It has to be submitted. When can we expect? What is the process of? We submit our plan by January of 2020. What happens right after that? How does that work?
So y'all adopt the plan. The plan is live. That's your kind of, it's operative and working. The Department of Water Resources was given 2 years to review the plans. So presumably during that time, you're working to kind of implement the first things you ID'd is critical to get started on. During that time, the department is using its regulation that it developed to say one of three things about the plan. The first, they could say, is it's adequate, and that means you're good to go. The second is that it is incomplete, and what that means is there's some kind of minor deficiencies. Maybe you overlooked a certain map, missed a monitoring point, something that they think can be fixed, and they will allow up to 180 days to fix issues that led to this incomplete status. If those issues get fixed within the 180 days, you're good to go, and to move forward in implementing your plan and continue implementing your plan. The third option is inadequate, and that's what triggers the State Water Board's authority to act. The statute says they need to kind of check in with us when they're making these findings that plans are inadequate. And that's really the turning point of where the State Water Board would have the ability to act. And where, as Natalie touched on, what gets triggered is not probation automatically. We have these new authorities that become active, but we still have to figure out how to move forward with applying them. Probation happens through a hearing, and that hearing would be in front of the State Water Board, where we'd kind of lay out options and how to fix the issues. What we're going to be looking at is we really just want to fix the issues. We're not kind of trying to use that as an opportunity to just take over the basin. So if they can get fixed, that's what we're going to kind of try and include and be thoughtful when we're proceeding with our authorities, rather than kind of killing momentum altogether. From there, moving even further out, if the plan is deemed adequate, there's these interim milestones, and that's where DWR laid out in the statute, or in their regulation. The statute also requires that every 5 years they have to check in and see how things are going.
During this assessment period, are there any costs to us that you're going to charge us if we're inadequate or incomplete or inadequate?
The costs start with the probationary basin. It's what we're pretty sure, and that's because after probation is when we start collecting the pumping data, and the fees are tied to the pumping data. So when pumpers submit a report to us, there's also a fee associated with that, and so that's where the first costs from the board's process come in.
So would an incomplete plan trigger probation? Say incomplete in January 2020, is that probationary after that point, or does the plan have to be deemed inadequate by DWR?
It has to be deemed inadequate by DWR first.
Okay, so incomplete plan just...
You're kind of in limbo to fix these issues that DWR identified before the board can do anything.
Okay.
And after the inadequate, it's not automatic probation. What is activated is our kind of ability to weigh in and decide what to do.
As determined at the water board hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Others?
I have a question. Sam, I don't anticipate this, being inadequate or anything, but the de minimis user is a great concern to me, and you had mentioned that. What would the state's definition of a de minimis user be if you guys did step in?
Well, there's what the statute gave us, and that's this 2 acre-feet cutoff, and then is it for domestic purposes? The question I get most often is, well, how do you know they're using 2 acre-feet if you don't meter them? How we're kind of approaching it, we articulated it a bit in our fee schedule, and so we laid out in the fee schedule that if a de minimis pumper has to start reporting to the board through the probationary process, the statute allows us to do that. The default is they're exempt from probation. However, if we kind of find out that that's an important piece, we can loop them into the reporting requirements. In that case, what we're saying is we're relying on the definition of domestic. And so there's other parts of our regulations where they've defined domestic purposes as less than half an acre of lawn. And that's something that we can do more easily from space or at scale if we have to kind of act in many basins at the same time. And so that's kind of what we think is going to work the best to start. That being said, that's not how locals have to approach it. Every basin has the ability, and GSAs are given the authorities to implement ordinances and definitions of how they think it works.
And that was my biggest concern. I believe what we've done, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we said up to 4 people could be a de minimis. So would the state consider that if it was pulling from one well, if they were using less than 2 acre-feet and it was 4 people, or you guys have a maximum connection point for the number of people?
We probably wouldn't have cause to weigh in on how you're doing it. And the way the Department of Water Resources is emphasizing when they're reviewing the plans is that a lot of it is outcome-based.
Okay, good.
To make sure that you're hitting these marks in the 5-year interim milestones to show what you're doing is working.
Okay, other comments? Questions? Go ahead. No? Okay, I have a couple. Could you go back to one of your slides? It was before you got to the reporting, right there.
This one?
Okay. When you were talking about this is the fees for intervention. That's assuming that we don't accomplish or it is not sufficient. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the cost of that is greater than, okay, let me see how many is. Okay. We're assuming that we can accomplish it and you come back and tell us. This tells us nothing about how we're going to achieve sustainability. It only tells you what the volume of people are using and how much, correct?
The fees are just to get us started in collecting the data.
So your fees would be sufficiently greater than this, I would assume.
These are the fees to start. So when we start probation and these reporting process where individual pumpers submit, that's where we start with these fees. What Natalie called out was this asterisk where if we have to do special studies, things like that, the cost will be significantly higher. The other piece that we touched on is how we work through the CEQA process. Some folks may be familiar, that can be pretty expensive. And I have a hunch folks might want to litigate some of our actions and that all of those legal fees would have to be passed back to the users within the basin, and that's where we think there could be another significant increase in cost over these fees.
When you would come up to the solutions to achieve sustainability, would your cuts be, excluding BLM and the Navy, would your cuts be across the board?
We do have to be consistent with water rights priorities, so we'll make sure that works. But honestly, we haven't worked out the details of exactly how we're going to do the cuts because it's going to be different in each basin. But we're trying to keep that option open just because it works with this idea of we're just a temporary solution, and that may be the most efficient to kind of protect things until you guys are ready to take back control.
If everything blows up, and I don't foresee that happening because we're working very diligently to include everybody and make sure that we address their concerns and their issues. But if the whole thing blows up, when you come back and you say to us, this is what we've decided is best for you, what is our option?
When we do that, we'll lay out exactly how to get rid of us. That we will say, here are the issues that we need fixed in order to get back on track with local control. And we plan to be very transparent about that, to say, here's why we are moving forward with probation, and here's how you can stop the probation process. And then that's how you are able to kind of stop
I don't want to use you as a hammer so that we can find ways, if you don't agree with what is developed by the GSA and the adoption of their plan, I don't want to be able to say, this is what you're going to get if you don't agree with this. But I want to be able to make sure everybody understands that, as Governor Brown said, and I have to admit, I really agree with him, the best in this particular issue is best done locally. I don't want to use that hammer, but I also want everybody to understand if we don't do it, you're going to do it for us, and then you will find ways to get out.
Yep.
Is that fair? Is that a fair assessment?
That seems fair.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Maybe I have another question.
Okay, let's come back. Wait a minute. Let's finish staff first. Okay.
I had one other question. Does the water board have the discretion to declare a basin partially probationary because there's an issue only in part of the basin and only apply these fees to those groundwater users in that area?
Yeah, there's a few pieces to that. One of the degrees of flexibility we have is in these reporting requirements. So that is the first big step in probation as we start collecting pumping data from everyone. If folks are already part of a monitoring program or they're already managed well and we don't think we need the data from that area, we can exclude those folks from these reporting requirements, which would then also exclude them from the fees. So the basin would be on probation, but certain folks that are already kind of metered would be okay.
So the entire basin would be declared probationary, but in the Water Board's judgment, only these users were subject to these fees and intervention.
Yeah, the effects of
okay.
probation.
Okay.
I have one more before Judy. If indeed we come to the point where we say, you've got the 2 years to decide whether we have fulfilled all that we want, that you want us to do, during those 2 years, what are we doing? Because if we are finding solutions for sustainability, but you have not approved the plan, are we sitting here waiting for 2 years to do something?
No, that's where I think that the plan is, once it's adopted by you, it's an active plan.
But you said it was, you could take up to 2 years to approve our plan. In that 2 years, what are we doing?
I believe you're moving forward with the plan. And just a quick distinction, there's a separation at the state level from who's reviewing the plan and then who's kind of acting if it's insufficient. And so my sister agency will be the one reviewing the plans, the Department of Water Resources. And so they'll have 2 years to review it. And if they find there's issues there, you could think of it more of like a course correction rather than like a stop. And so the whole idea is to, with course corrections, get the GSAs and yourselves back on track. And so I don't know if it's probably going to be up to each GSA how they want to proceed, if they want to be really conservative or if they want to move really quickly. And that's where I'm not sure there's an answer for, do nothing for 2 years. I don't think that makes sense.
To me, it doesn't. Why would we be doing this if we could just sit around for 2 years and wait for you to make a decision? My concern is, though, if we do these, if you've taken the plan, you haven't given us total approval, we still can proceed with the plan, even though you haven't given us approval. Okay. All right. Any other questions from?
I got a question, and I'm not starting a casino question or no debate on that. I just have a question for you about federal rights. I have a concern. The Navy has agreed to work with us, and they are a very active participant. And at any time, I believe they should be able to use as much water as they need to use for the base. But if an Indian tribe was to come and say they wanted to work with this GSA, under Sigma law, we could allow that. But they could also back out at any time and extract as much as they needed to. Is that correct or incorrect?
I'm not sure it's that simple. Because it would be, and I'm not familiar with tribal law, which is on the different categories of federal law. Each one is equally complicated, but a bit different. So it's not the same as the armed services. But when you're creating a new reservation, I don't know if that kind of has meaning for how their water rights standing is. I do have Nicole on the line.
Okay, that would be my question. The new reservation, could we make sure that they were tied into this GSA to where we could control the usage?
Let me add a question to that. If you have agreement where the tribe has given up their sovereign immunity and agreed to use water through the water district and are not going to export water, they're not going to do anything except simply use water through the water district and given up your sovereign immunity, does that affect what we're doing? And Nicole, if you can answer both of those together, please.
Hello there. Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, a little louder would be good.
Great. Great. And I'm sorry I couldn't be there today. I will do my best to take a stab at it, and then let me know if I missed some of the questions. In terms of a waiver of sovereign immunity, that would be one mechanism to bring the tribe in and fully integrate the tribe into a GSP. That would, of course, be up to the tribe whether they want to engage in that, although there may be some incentive to do that and cooperative reasons to do that. We have seen in the San Luis Rey Basin other situations where tribes and the GSA are working on an MOU to work together, and that MOU at this point doesn't involve what I would call an explicit waiver of sovereign immunity, but there is discussion as to how enforcement will work so that there will be mechanisms in place and a venue in place so that if disputes arise, there would be a process to go through that. So there's an explicit waiver of sovereign immunity, and then I think there's some other options, and we would be happy to, if that becomes an issue, I think the board and board staff would be happy to provide technical assistance to try to work through some of those issues because we are seeing them in other basins. In terms of a new water right, a new reservation and the water rights associated, it's really going to be, as Sam pointed out, it's complicated and it's going to be a case-by-case basis. I'm not familiar with the facts. I mean, if it really is a new reservation, then that would imply that the water rights be generally junior. I mean, it's still a Federal Reserve right if there is an explicit reservation, but there is a priority related with Federal Reserve rights. That said, there's still a sovereign immunity element. And in addition, the tribe will have state overlying rights and be subject to sovereign immunity with respect to those water rights. So in some respects, I think the underlying water right is less important than thinking about sovereign immunity and the degree to which regulation can occur. And in those cases, I think the most successful mechanism probably is going to be some kind of agreement, a memorandum of understanding, a coordination agreement, bringing the tribes into the GSA through a JPA. There's a couple of different options. And setting out by contract or by agreement how disputes or how management or how governance of the basin is going to occur.
Okay, thank you. We have a board. We have our attorney. One of the attorneys has to leave, and I would ask if there isn't any more questions. I know you want to hear his report, so if there isn't any more questions from staff or from public.
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman, I do have one question.
Pardon me?
I do have one question regarding this.
Okay. All
Sam,
right, let's go ahead then.
We've established a pumping fee to pay for our plan. If it's going to take up to 2 years for the water board to determine whether or not our plan is acceptable, and we're encouraged to implement the plan that we have presented to you, can we continue to use those pumping fees to pay for the implementation of the plan, or do we have to find another way of funding that?
We're getting a bit further than where my comfort is. One, because the Department of Water Resources is the one that's going to be reviewing the plans. But with a big caveat, from my understanding of this, is that the review of the plan isn't undoing kind of the ordinances and things of a local agency. It's just saying whether this plan is good or not. It's not kind of taking away authorities. Where I'm a little fuzzy is once they make their determination, does it undo something? I don't know if that helps, but to me it seems like you could proceed. I'm calling out Nicole again. Do you think that's right, Nicole?
Yes, I think that's right.
Okay. Judy, can you ask your question, please?
Well, actually, I have two questions, Judy Decker. Are you going to have public comment? And my question is, I think most of us know about the Fox Canyon adjudication. Fox Canyon, I believe, formed a GSA that was already approved by the Department of Water Resources, but what I don't know is now that they are in adjudication, if that would happen here, for instance, adjudication after a plan was filed with the Department of Water Resources, does adjudication stop the plan, or does the GSA board have the ability to keep going forward with their plan while the adjudication takes place? And I don't know who's going to answer that one.
That's like Keith.
The premise is incorrect. Fox Canyon GMA has not adopted their GSP yet. They've got I think set for next week, a preliminary ordinance on allocations, but they've not, that's only a component of the GSP, and they've only ever advanced 3 chapters of a draft GSP so far.
So does anyone know what would happen if the situation I described occurred? Would a GSA have the legal ability to keep moving forward with their plan under an adjudication?
We would have to ask a judge that question.
Well, I'm in that case too, Keith, so sort of following it. So the premise in the law is that you're not supposed to be able to file and process an adjudication if it's going to interfere with the SGMA process. So the SGMA process prevails. So in that case, they've been fighting for 3 or 4 months because they have causes of action challenging the GSA process and a general adjudication. Fox Canyon sought to stop and stay the general adjudication until the GSA process was over, saying it would interfere with it. The attorneys who are pressing the adjudications, a group of farming interests, said, no, we can determine all the water rights in this case, and when that gets determined, it's actually going to be in aid of getting an allocation plan that's acceptable in SGMA. So the last ruling was they are proceeding with the adjudication, and they're proceeding with the SGMA process simultaneously.
Thank you.
Peggy,
Okay.
I just had one thing I wanted to add before we stop. And Steve Johnson with Stetson Engineers, Water Resources Manager, Sam, and it's good to see you guys. Heather's right behind you. I want to make sure you talk to Heather before you leave, because sometimes I get tied up and I might not be able to get over there with the people and stuff here, so I want to make sure of that. But also on the issue of completing the GSP, adopting the GSP, and submitting for approval of DWR, I want to make sure everybody on the board knows, and Sam gets our assurances too, because this is the way we do things. We fully intend to be in lockstep, pretty much in lockstep with DWR, State Board, and Sam's people, long before we adopt it at the board level. So we would anticipate by the time it gets to DWR, this board would have we would also have a pretty high confidence level that we're going to have a good plan. I mean, there may be some minor thing that we may need to do, but we don't anticipate having a problem getting the board approved by DWR, because we're going to be working with the staff all the way through this. So I want to make sure you're aware of that.
Thank you. Okay, no more comments, and we're going to move an item on the agenda, and we're going to have we're going to have our Water Resources Manager ask Mr. Markman to, no, we're not?
It'll be the manager's report.
Oh, the manager's report. Okay,
Yes,
the manager's report, please.
As you well know, our special counsel, Jim Markman, as well as staff, met with several stakeholders in the valley regarding water allocation. And at this point in time, I'm going to have Mr. Markman make a short presentation or short report on those meetings.
Yeah, let me update. The process that I'm trying to work on with the Water Resource Manager is implementing the allocation of pumping rights out into the future to reach sustainability, and this takes into account a lot of concepts. For example, can the basin be mined more, or will that cause immediate negative impacts, particularly on small wells? What are the prospects, and how do we start teeing up or implementing supplemental water projects, whether they're interim or permanent supplemental water projects? Again, at the same time, we can be producing an allocation plan that has all of the facets in it for preparing to cut back basin production with transferability and all the other methodologies that would cushion any economic blow. We have been talking to people, trying to build a mutual goal, which I think we are building, of getting this thing done, but not getting ahead of the science. So right now, some of those questions can't be answered without more information. Mr. Johnson's office is working on that information. We're continuing to talk, and we're talking to attorneys for all of the pumping interests to get their ideas of what they'd like to avoid or not avoid. Frankly, my goal is to generate a plan that is not worth fighting against with respect to any particular concerns in the basin, any pumping concerns. Don't do something that could be considered inequitable and not thought through, so that the lawyers for the pumpers are almost compelled to tell them, no, you've got to litigate this, or do what's happening in the Los Pozos Basin in Ventura County, which we just heard about. We'd rather get this done in a way that works. So we're going to simultaneously, from now through the spring, get the generation of this data, for example, on what the impact of further overproduction would do to shallow wells, individual wells. At the same time, try to work with a group of people to draft an implementation plan that's structurally correct, but doesn't necessarily in the beginning have numbers or timelines in it that would be offensive and essentially drive the whole process into an adversarial process. So that's pretty much what we're trying to do. We're doing it constantly, weekly, and working together with people and having meetings. And I think that could be a very successful project. But as I said the first time I think I spoke to the authority, the technical facts are going to drive the product that we give you. And we don't want to drive a product because some people think it's acceptable in their minds, regardless of what scientific studies will show, because that inevitably will light up another group and create opposition that we don't need here if we're going to be successful. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from staff? Any questions from the public, understanding that Mr. Markman has to leave shortly, but I want you to ask your questions if you do have any. Mr. Markman, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your hard work. We appreciate it. That means we don't appreciate the rest of you attorneys. Did you get that? No? Sorry? Wrong? Okay. All right. Then let's go to the next item on the agenda, which is public comments. I didn't get a chance to thank you. You guys did a great job. And Nicole, I appreciate the fact that you took our questions and gave us good answers. And we invite you back anytime you're ready and willing to come, because we need you. Thank you. It's a good collaboration. All right, public comment. I'm going to say this time is for people to make comments to address the board on items not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Judy, please.
Judy Decker, I'm standing here before you.
Getting closer to the microphone.
Judy Decker, I'm standing here before you as a director of the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District, and I'm pleased to announce that our Simis station is up and operating, and some of the board members yesterday went on a field trip to visit it and learn all about it. Simis stands for California Irrigation Management Information System. You can look it up on the DWR website for that. It's station 257. It reports hourly not only water evaporation, but temperature, humidity, wind speed, all the things. What it is a little weather station. And I'm pleased to tell you that this was a personal goal of mine when I was appointed to the RCD board back in 2012. And with the board's help and with money from the California Department of Conservation, this goal has been achieved. This weather station is something that can be used by not only things like the golf course, which is where it is located, but large and small agriculture and individual homeowners. And I think it will be a great boon to our society here in monitoring their water. And it also, we couldn't have done it without the help of the U.S. Navy, who first allowed us to put it there, and with all the help that former Commander Brian Longbottom gave in negotiating the legal intricacies of the Navy. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you to the RCD for all that hard work and benefit to the community. Right, next, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lee. I work for the company WellIntel. And it's my goal to bring you guys all the groundwater information that you need. And I think you'll be interested in that because the tools we developed are inexpensive and extremely useful. We developed an acoustic sensor that monitors water levels, a pump sensor that measures pump runtime, and all the data is visualized online on dashboards. A couple weeks ago, I presented at the Technical Advisory Committee meeting, just telling them a little bit about me, my tools, and WellIntel. And I think we'll be following up on that at the next meeting. And at some point, I'd like to bring information forward to the board here and tell them about our offer. Just a little bit more info. We work with the USGS, we have for years, and a number of state agencies. So it's my job to bring this information and technology to California. And I've heard from Peter Brown that you guys could use this technology. So that's why I'm here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lee. I heard you at the TAC meeting, and I was pretty excited about what the information you got at such a reasonable price. It seemed, I thought something like that would be many, many hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars, and it was reasonable, and I'm interested for you to follow up with all of us, and especially individual well owners, because quite frankly, it was within their, most of their budgets, I would think, and to have real-time information on what's happening. So however you want to follow up, check with our staff. Okay? Thank you.
Peggy, if I might, because it'll save a report later, move things along. At the TAC, it was assigned to Steve Reich of my office because he's working on the data collection and monitoring. It was assigned. We do expect to have a review memo out ahead of the TAC meeting for everybody to review. So if there's comments or questions ahead of time, we'll get those, and it will be on the agenda for the TAC meeting. So, yes.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
My name is Sophia Merck, and last month I had a gentleman read a letter for me because I had a conflict of a meeting in another area, was not able to make it. I noticed that my letter was not put on the website, and therefore I'm resubmitting it. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was San Bernardino County did do an ordinance, and I put this in my letter, and about a cone of depression and drilling in somebody else's cone of depression, and that should be a county ordinance. I really think that that's one thing that this group could look at. Another thing is that the disadvantaged community in this area is not really being looked at as hard as they could be. And I really think that needs to be looked at also. So I'm resubmitting my letter for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff, can we make sure it gets attached, please? Thank you. All right. Any other public comment? All right. Then we will go into the consent calendar. Is there a motion? Discussion? Okay, I'll read it. Approve minutes of board meeting October 18th. Approve expenditures, and prior to this meeting, prior to the calling of this meeting, we added 3 bills from DRI to the agenda, and it was before we went into closed session. So I'm just letting you know we did add 3 bills, and so that it was for the amount. Somebody else is going to have to read it. Mick, can you read that, please?
My glasses.
Okay, can somebody read it, please?
Take a picture of it and blow it up.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you need?
Can you? Is this on? Okay. The 3 invoices. Is this working? There it is. For $6,245.08 is one invoice. For $23,789.91. So what is that running tally? About almost $30,000. And then $25,250.20.
Thank you. just for the record, those items were added. So, and then the next item to approve of that is the other expenditures we have listed, $6,240 to RWG Law and $74,772.49 to Stetson. And are you going to give us the financial update?
Can I step in, though? I just want to get some clarity. I understand that these are intended to be added as need arose items, meaning the need arose subsequent to posting the agenda and the authority has immediate need to take action. But I'm not clear that I heard you guys take a vote and make those findings as part of it. Did I miss that?
We did it before we went into closed session.
I don't believe we voted.
We didn't vote?
Yeah, I don't think so. So I would recommend
please correct us.
Before you adopt the consent calendar that you formally take a vote making a finding the need arose subsequent to posting the agenda. That's because I believe we got the invoices late.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Lauren?
Director Harrington?
Aye.
Director Gleason? Chairwoman Breeden?
Yes.
Director Griffin?
Aye.
And Director Snoke?
Aye.
Okay, so 5 ayes, all approved. Now we can make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, Lauren?
Director Harrington?
Aye.
Director Gleason? Chairwoman Breeden?
Yes.
Director Griffin?
Aye.
Director Snoke?
Thank you. Is there a financial update?
Give me a second. Let me get back to it.
Okay, we'll skip that and we'll come back. Oh, you're ready for it now? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, according to the financial update we received from the county, it looks like we have projected revenue over the next several months up until March of about $63,000 on the pumping fee. We do have estimations for the Stetson billing up until March, and it appears we have a total net of anticipated at the end of March of $433,000. So it looks like everything's going okay.
Okay. Do we need to approve that, staff, or is that just accept it?
Just accept it.
Okay, thank you. So it's accepted. All right, number 8, the Water Resources Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
That's fine.
I did want to say that they've already left, but first, from our perspective, Stetson, that was one of the very best presentations I've seen from DWR on Sigma. A lot of them are very general, but that kind of got down to right down to the basics and why it's important that we do what we're doing here. So it was very good, and I can tell you, folks, they're gone right now. I'd say it with him here too. Our staff's worked with Sam before. He's a very, very good guy to have on our team. And so we will nurture that relationship with Sam because he's very sharp, he's on top of it, and he's very, very open and fair. So that was good. We do have several items on the Water Resources Manager report. First, of course, is the poem. We have the pleasure of having Heather with us. Jeff had another commitment, and we've got Heather, so she got to ride all the way up with me and all the way home this time. She had the pleasure of that. But Heather's going to do the poem, and then I'll jump in on the other three. And obviously, Heather, if I miss something, let me know as we're going through this stuff.
Sure.
So Heather will do the poem. Thanks.
So for the record, Heather Steele with Stetson Engineers. You all have a poem, is that correct? And it is projected. Great. So there were significant revisions last month that were presented to the poem. These are based on TAC direction that revised some of the modeling schedule. So those have already been incorporated, and in this month's poem update, there have just been some fine-tuning of those dates and those tasks. And we've also added new PAC items, as was requested. So there are a few new line items on here, too, that you'll notice. In general, our dates, as we fine-tune them, we try to anchor them to TAC and PAC meeting dates too, and you can notice that on the dates. So on the first page of the poem is the summary that shows the rolled up tasks, just the main headings. I know many of you are very familiar with this. I only want to point out that line 30 through line 97, those are the main tasks under task 4, the GSP development, and we are currently working on all those tasks. Those are in progress. So now to the detailed poem, the second page. I want to highlight line 31, the hydrogeologic conceptual model. We are going to be presenting the draft hydrogeologic conceptual model to the TAC this December meeting, so this is going to be a critical item. And it'll be refined during that month of December and presented again in January as a final HCM. We have also added, let's see, that's line now 35, the PAC item associated with the hydrogeologic conceptual model as well, because we do believe this final document is going to be a graphical figure along with a memo that's associated with it. But this will be a valuable tool for the basin as a visual aid to help with the public. So we have put that as a PAC item to discuss policy and outreach items for that. Moving on to the numerical modeling, I want to highlight, that starts on line 36 of the poem. The model calibration is complete, and currently we're in the stage of doing the transport and TDS modeling. This was part of the revised schedule that was presented last month. We have now moved that up, and it's the current modeling task with DRI. Subsequent to the transfer modeling, we're going to go right into the modeling of the baseline and then modeling of the management actions. So these are all in consecutive, very critical tasks. Currently, we are also discussing with the TAC management scenarios that are going to be going into line 48, the modeling of the management actions. That's currently discussed with the TAC, also sustainable management criteria, because those are all tied together. Moving on to data gaps, those start on line 53. The data gap evaluation, we are moving currently forward with what is in our Prop 1 scope and moving along with those tasks. Some of those are going to be going to the TAC again this month in December. I do want to point out Director Brown has asked the TAC to reevaluate some of the scope associated with that data gap evaluation, just in terms of cost savings, if there was ways to maybe refine the scope slightly. So the TAC has been asked that in the previous November TAC meeting. So if there are changes to that, we'd have to go back to DWR and get approval, because currently the scope is already approved in the grant agreement. So we'd have to go back to them, and then we'd reflect the changes on the poem as well if that does occur. But we are moving forward with our current schedule. The only other thing I wanted to point out is, there's two things. We've added policy PAC advisory to the importer water and recycle water, and I know they started that last month too. Those are important issues for the PAC, and we've also, I want to point out that the draft introduction chapter is going to be going to the TAC and the PAC this next coming TAC meeting and PAC meeting in December 6th too. So we are working diligently in getting the draft chapters out. I know that's a hot item, and it's an important topic, so they will have the first draft to review. That's all of the specific items I want to point out. If there's questions, I could take them.
Can I just add, Heather,
Sure.
we also talked, and I was going to do it, but I don't have it in front of me anymore. We are working on other sections concurrently of the GSP text, and you'd mentioned to me that there was a section I think we're shooting for in January and another one in March. 2 other sections.
Yes.
This is for people like Derek. And you guys have been looking for text on the GSP, and we're working on several sections at the same time.
Chapter 2, the plan area and basin area, we've been making significant progress on that chapter. But there's certain elements like the hydrogeologic conceptual model that have to go into that, so it cannot be finalized yet. But what text we have already, we have the basis of the chapter there. Other elements are going to be added to it. So we anticipate bringing that to the TAC at the February meeting.
Okay.
And the PAC.
Okay.
Both for review. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, any comment from the board, staff? Please.
Yeah, as I was looking, reviewing the poem here, I noticed on your numerical groundwater model, there are a couple of critical path items that
Yes.
should have started but show not having started yet. Right? They were like 44 and 47. I was just wondering what the plan was to gain back the time on those.
47 is the discussion of sustainable management criteria. That is in progress, and that has been taken to the TAC before.
Okay, I just saw it marked as 0%, so I was wondering if...
Oh, yes. I think, let's see. That is because there was $0 billed to that and to that subtask, because it's probably grouped into a different subtask.
Okay.
So, yeah, I see the discrepancy there.
Okay. Yeah, that was just my question with,
yeah.
with 44 and 47. It just didn't show the progress on it. And I was wondering, because the last meeting it was mentioned we were kind of reaching a critical state of starting to get behind on a couple activities. And I was wondering where we were as far as like if we felt we were back on schedule, if we're still a few weeks behind, or how we're tracking.
Yeah, to item 44, the transport TDS modeling, most of those billings are going to be DRI's billings too, so I think there's a lag in reporting the invoices as they come. Then I would get them and be able to update and show the budget on there.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
I had a question. Does the review of the changes in the work plan for the Prop 1 funding delay the execution of that agreement?
So we have the execute agreement. This poem is only reflecting of that, the tasks that are executed and approved. No changes have been asked of DWR. I want to make that clear. The TAC was just asked by Director Brown to review those, the scope of those tasks. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Donna, we do have an executed agreement already.
Yes.
Yeah, but if you ask changes for DWR to review changes in the document, in the plan, work plan, does that delay submitting invoices to them?
Yes, I believe it would. And that's something to consider if they wanted to bring back changes to DWR.
On that, Donna, since you've asked the question, because the next item that we have is in the Prop 1 grant funding. We are looking at, Director Brown did ask several questions about scopes and budgets. I believe at the last TAC meeting, we addressed his concerns, and I think Director Brown is good with where we're headed. Essentially, a couple of them have been hit already. We know where we're at, but several are still in front of the TAC or ad hoc groups to give us direction, the Water Resources Manager from the TAC or the ad hoc group, as to what their recommendation is on the current scope and the budget. We need to pull all of that together to make sure we go to if we're going to go to DWR, we have to justify it first. If we're going to go to DWR, we want to do it one time, because we're not sure how receptive they're going to be anyway to a change in the scope and budget of an approved agreement, but we will do it one time. And I think your question is very, very important, that one of the things we don't want to do is delay invoicing the DWR right now. So, good points.
Okay, any other comments from board staff? Okay, comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. Sir?
Yes. Going to the next item. This is actually pretty short. Prop 1 status and schedule. Again, the grant agreement was executed back in September. It's done. We're in good shape. We're moving forward and coordinating with DWR. We did provide at, I think, the last meeting, sort of a layout of what our administrative responsibilities are under that agreement. Most of the stuff that's laid out in that agreement occur after we're already done. Essentially, we're required or we're expected to submit quarterly progress reports and quarterly invoicing. According to our agreement, the first one is due in January. Our goal, because we have a lot of catch-up period, a lot of a reconciliation for the stuff we've already done, our goal is to have that submitted. It's not going to happen in November, I don't think, because we got Thanksgiving next week, but we certainly want to get it in ahead of schedule. So our goal is to get the first progress report and invoice to DWR in December, which means we have to prepare a draft. We definitely want to review it with our GA team. We have a technical team with the attorneys, and the general managers have the team look at it. We want the board to look at it to make sure the board is good with the submittal, with probably a report in closed session or a presentation here. But our goal is to get that first progress report and invoice into DWR in December, and it should be a good progress report, fairly complete. It'll probably be the biggest one we do, and it should be the biggest invoice that we do because we're going to be picking up a lot of stuff going back. So a lot of work to be done on that, but that's where we're at.
Can I ask a question on this? The
Sure.
progress report will include what?
Progress report includes everything we've done on the GSP since you formed the authority.
And that will be the report to them and to us?
Yes, it's essentially to them. It's required under the Prop 1 grant funding. But the reason why I say this is this is the first one. Everyone after that can pick up from the last progress report going forward. So everyone after that's only 3 months. This one, we're going back a long ways. So this one needs to be pretty comprehensive. There's quite a bit of work involved in this. This was part of the discussion about staff support and things like that. We don't know what's going to be required under this progress reporting and invoicing by DWR until we submit one and we get comments back. But we do know this first one is going to be the biggest and the hardest one to do.
Okay, I know we've gotten partials of that report back. I'm really interested in seeing the whole thing and what you give. So thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Then the next item I have is where we're at on the pump fee status and schedule and status. The registration status as of just a few days ago, on the 12th, was 45 registered accounts, 20 accounts not registered, believed to be non-de minimis based on criteria. So we've still got to get those. October pumping report payment was due on 11/10. Verification processing of October payments is underway. Status report to be given at December board meeting, so we'll tell you where we're at based upon return invoices and things like that for the second round of monthly pumping. The December pumping report will be mailed out in a couple of weeks, right after Thanksgiving, actually. And right now, I will say, there's continued coordination between our office and Lauren and Rika. And again, I want to make sure to take the opportunity to recognize the fact that we're getting a lot of help from district staff and city staff to do this stuff. But that's all we have. It's just an update. We're hoping this is becoming more routine as we go forward, and it becomes more just a regular billing. Probably one of the questions we're going to get is what's happening, and maybe from Derek, what's happening with the non-de minimis in the investigation. I'll just give you an overview because we're not doing it. We're involved in it. We're not doing it directly. The suggestion was made that a staff person, engineer level, but a staff person level, start looking at this. Renee from the Water District has spent a couple of days going through Google Earth, and I think some discussion have been had with some of the ag folks about going through Google, I'm gurgling, between Google Earth and a GIS base to go out and try to identify all of the non-de minimis pumpers that are out there. There's a correlation process between identifying what we think based upon the mapping are non-de minimis, correlating that with the ones we already have between parcel numbers and addresses and things, so that we can identify those that we think are non-de minimis but aren't picked up yet. That process is underway. It's being done by staff, not by Stetson, so we're trying to keep the cost down to do this. There also needs to be, and I believe we're trying to make sure of that there is a documentation process for each one of these potential accounts that are out there, so that as we go forward and may have to look back at some point for whatever reason, we do have documentation of the efforts that are being made to identify all non-de minimis pumpers. So that effort is underway. It is being done by Water District staff and being coordinated through our office. We're trying to help provide just technical information and guidance without doing a whole lot of hands-on work. So that's the status of trying to get all the pumpers on board.
When is that process going to be completed?
You know, based upon the where we're at right now, and we just got the information back from Renee. We're coordinating with her to do a correlation, and she's going to do it, a correlation between our information that we have, because she's really not directly involved in the the reports that go out for the pumping reports and who we already have on board. So we're getting that information to her. She's going to do that correlation. I would expect that may take a few days for her to do that. Once she has that done, we should be able to identify which parcels out there that are identified as, we think are identified as non-de minimis and need to be notified. And then it'll be back to the process we did before, where we will work with RICA and send out registration forms and start that process again. So I would expect we would be at that point, at least before this next board meeting, and maybe even by the next TAC meeting, we can report that we've identified this many more non-de minimis potential accounts, and that we've prepared and sent out registration and report forms.
Steve, I knew I sent you a letter from one of the reporters who, were you able to address his concerns? Max Hovaton?
Remember what his concern was?
He was questioning how you came about his fee.
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. We know that one, don't we? Yes. I don't know if he's here or not, but if he is,
I don't see him.
Happy to talk to him afterward.
Okay.
There was a concern, Heather can talk about it. I just want to give the audience a general on this. There was a concern about the formula that we used, that we provided in the report forms versus, and Max is an engineer, so I want to make sure, he's a really smart guy. I think he might be a PhD, a doctor. But anyway, he's a really smart guy. And he was using a different formula and coming up with different units. And the bottom line is, and Max knows how to use the exclamation point when he says this letter.
Yeah.
So he was pretty adamant about his concerns. Anyway, he sent us a letter concerned about the differences in the approach. Our approach back to him is we're on the same page. We're very close to the same number. We're really talking about different units. It was with different units that were in the report versus what he was reporting, because we were reporting tenths of acre feet because of small producers, and he was reporting an acre feet. So they were off, but they're really not a big deal.
Okay.
So Heather can explain a little bit more.
I just want to make sure it was done.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure
I don't need to get into detail on that, but just to say we get those kind of things a lot in this process.
Yes.
He's not the only one who has submitted something. So some submit by email, some by letter, which apparently went to you at this time. But we've been we document that. We reach out to them by phone, by email. We haven't sent individual letters yet at this point to people. We've tried to be more informal to get everyone on the same page. But he's not alone. We have been working through those issues. There's many accounts that
Thank
have
you for
questions.
your efforts.
This was a little more adamant, but we get these.
Okay, thank
but
you.
I wanted to say one other thing. This is important for the folks to know and the board to know, is that in our approach to this, we tried very hard not to direct people how to report, other than to give them guidelines. Because we don't have the staff. We never intended to go out and verify. We never intended to be a police in this. The approach was primarily as reasonable and accurate as possible for people to self-report. So wherever we could, we provided guidelines, and the same thing. We took the same approach with Max on this. Is we're providing you guidelines. We might be a little bit off. It's not enough to worry about between the numbers we have. They're very, very close. And our approach is he's reporting it. It's his report. He believes in the guidelines he's using. We're fine with that. And that's how we're doing with pretty much everybody, is using their best judgment to report, trying to be more cooperative. That's our approach.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One more question. And Stephen, I noticed on the financial report, we're using an estimate of $63,000 in pumping fee revenue on a per month basis.
Yes.
So just to clarify, so we'll have a 2-month lag going forward due to the timing of the board meetings and the collection of those payments in to be able to report what those actuals are. Is that?
I can answer that one too. Our deadline each month is the 10th to return the payments and their monthly reporting form. The 10th fell on a Saturday, so we only got in on Monday was the 12th, and just happened this month. The date of the board meeting was earlier than what happened last month. So last month we were able to give the extensive report. This month there was only a couple days before we had to get everything in for the board meeting. So it's not that it's automatically going to be a 2-month delay every time.
Okay. Yeah.
Hopefully by next month. I think the board meeting is on the 20th, so that gives us 10 days after they're due, so we could have 2 months updated then.
Thank you.
She's doing the work, so she can do the report.
Derek, come on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Derek Hoffman for Meadowbrook Dairy. If you're taking public comment, thank you. Mr. Johnson, thank you for your report today. Appreciate that. It is helpful, especially for those that are paying the fees and registering their wells. We do appreciate knowing what's going on. And it sounds like you're starting to look at some of the other non-de minimis pumpers and trying to make sure everybody's that's required to be is brought into the process. And I just want to raise an issue today. My intention is to raise an issue so that we can hopefully find a solution together and achieve consensus on it as we can move forward together. And it has to do with the process and getting reliable data on the domestics, the de minimis users, the other small pumpers, the co-ops, the mutuals. And the issue that I'm mentioning is the need for reliable data on their wells and their water use. And we've heard this mentioned a couple times today. We know that it's of concern. We really appreciate Mr. Bolin Bryan coming today from the State Water Board. I thought he gave a great presentation. He gave an overview of SGMA, and he explained, as you all know, the need to establish sustainable management criteria in your GSP. That includes something called minimum thresholds. For example, water levels. Where do you want water levels to be? Where do they need to be? And in order to do that, you need a data-based, refined approach. You don't want your dentist using a hacksaw, right? And for the same, by that analogy, here we need a data-based and refined approach to establish those minimum thresholds. And tying a few pieces together here, we heard a moment ago, the Water Resources Manager team is starting the process right now to look at sustainable management criteria and starting to model out into the future 10, 20, 50 years what type of management actions ought to be done to correct the basin. But in order to project forward, we have to first understand what our baseline is. And that baseline is what I'm talking about. You're starting to get good data, it sounds, on the non-de minimis users, but the issue of the de minimis users still exists. And so we've heard a number of domestics come forward to these meetings and say, my well is dropping, water levels are a concern. And we share those concerns too. But in order to mitigate them, you need data, you need information. And we've heard that there are, or could be, as many as between 900 or 1,200 de minimis users in the basin. I don't know the number. I don't think anyone really knows. That's the issue. But if you assume 2 acre-feet for every one of those, that's, do the math, up to 2,400 acre-feet of water. That's almost a third of the Water Resources Manager's current estimate of the natural recharge. So it's potentially a lot of water. It's potentially a large group. May I have just 30 more seconds?
Yes.
Thank you, and I'll finish. So in order to consider the interests of those users, we need information about their wells. When they say water levels are dropping, I'm really concerned. The question I ask is, where is your well? How much do you pump? How deep is your well? How old is your well? How can we mitigate the concern until we understand the issue and have the data? And so again, my reason for bringing the issue forward is because as I see it from the outside, it looks like the Water Resources Manager team is starting to address some technical issues, but I would ask that the board really look hard and possibly take action in order to get the necessary data to support those processes, particularly as it comes to the de minimis users, and so we can establish management actions that everyone can agree with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Steve, are you finishing?
I'm pretty much, the next item was the well monitoring report. I think we talked about that already. This has to do with the well tell information. And we will be coming back, as I mentioned, to the TAC and to the board. Primarily, and just as an overview, we're looking at this information. It looks like certainly useful information, and it certainly can save some cost. The area of cost may be in the administrative. I mean, if we have a system that can give us some hydrologic information on wells in the basin, and at the same time help report production that cuts down on administrative time, absolutely worthwhile looking at. So we will be looking at things like the capital cost, O&M cost to run the program, the technical merits of different ways to do what we're talking about doing, the reliability, And ultimately, the goal would be to make a recommendation on where it may be applicable, where it may not be so applicable. Because we've got two things we're looking at. We're looking at the regular monitoring program, which we already have a plan set up for monitoring wells in the basin. And then we have all of these production wells that can be monitoring locations. We're not originally designed to be a monitoring location for hydrologic conditions, but certainly help with production information. So we will be coming back with that information. I think he's pretty well done most of his work. I just need to see the results, and then we'll bring it to the TAC. And as I mentioned, we will release his draft technical memorandum well ahead of the TAC, so there will be opportunity for input. And that was it.
Okay, any other staff or board questions to our water manager? Any public? Okay, we will go to the next item, which is the approval of general liability insurance coverage for the IWV GA. Ron, you have that?
That will be Alan Christensen will be making that presentation.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Alan Christensen from the County of Kern. One of the things that public agencies need, and you are a public agency, as a joint agency, you are still a public agency. You need insurance for general liability and other purposes. And so my experience with, I was formerly the risk manager for the County of Kern, so I took on the assignment of going out and finding some quotes. We found two quotes that are before you. We thought we had another one coming, but probably never got back to us, and that happens sometimes. The quotes that we receive, and on the second page of your staff report, we have a kind of a breakdown. Both of the submitters, J. Prima and Gladfelter, gave quotes for 6 different coverages. The critical part that you need is commercial general liability. You need public officials and management liability coverage, and then we have some excess coverage as well, which is in excess of the commercial general liability coverage. So it gives you more coverage on top of that. The two submitters, J. Prima, which is a pooled coverage, was the least expensive and would provide sufficient coverage. Gladfelter, which is a sort of straight insurance coverage, was a little more expensive. Not a little more expensive, but significantly more. J. Prima was $8,654. Gladfelter for the same coverage, $15,344. There are differences in the coverage, in the type of coverage and the nature of it. J. Prima is a pooled coverage. In fact, I would be surprised if any of the agencies that you belong to aren't in some kind of pooled situation, a risk management pool, a joint powers authority that provides its members pooled coverage. In other words, you join the pool, you absorb, they go out and buy insurance, but you basically pay premiums to the pool instead of to an insurance company. The pool acts as the insurance company for those members. Again, they go out and purchase excess coverage, but they pay the claims. So with J. Prima, you are in a pool. So if other water districts are in that pool, if there are large claims, everybody pays a little bit toward that claim. So it's a little different. But it's the most affordable way that government agencies can buy insurance nowadays, because oftentimes they can't get, private insurance companies won't insure. In this case, you actually have a private insurer that is offered coverage, Gladfelter. That's straight insurance. It's like insurance you would buy if you bought auto insurance or whatever. You buy it from a company, and you pay premiums based on the risk. They evaluate the risk and provide premiums for you. Staff's recommending the J. Prima coverage. It's a good way to go. It's less expensive. I will say that, and there are some different costs associated with it. You see, there's an admin fee that comes with the J. Prima coverage. That's to pay for some of the overhead costs to administer that pool. We recommend that you purchase all the coverage or at least approve all the coverage my recommendation is, for instance, the property coverage, you'd rely on the general manager to obtain that coverage when you had property, because right now we don't have any property to cover, and as long as that quote is in place, I feel pretty comfortable. This, at least on the J Prima coverage, you can opt out of those any coverages you like. You can't opt out of the admin fees, but you could, for instance, you could just not choose to take the property quote until you needed it. And I would recommend that you approve the entire quote, and then the coverages become available, or use the coverage as needed. Property being the likely one you would exclude. Property crime is a coverage that is, or commercial crime is not property crime. Commercial crime is another one that covers in case of some criminal activities that might happen within an organization or from outside parties as well, I believe. That's an optional coverage as well. So I'll leave it up to you. Again, you can exclude some coverages as a staff recommendation. Those top three are sort of the critical things you need to have on the list from our perspective. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have, and I think you have at least one.
I just had a question for you. Can you hear me? I don't see the package for Glatfelder in here.
I did not. I actually have it with me. I think I brought it with me. I didn't put it in the packet, but I have a copy of it if you'd like it.
Well, no, my only question really is this coverage through this company is only for 5 months of insurance. No. So this says the coverage period would be 11/1/2018 to 4/1/2019. So that's a 5-month period. So
if you look, and that's kind of deceptive. You're exactly right. If you look on the page 2 of 13, is that what you're looking at? Page at the bottom, 2 of 13.
I can't read the numbers; they're too small. But I can read that number. So
there should be a summary page that shows the different sections. Section 1, property.
Okay.
Is that what
I've got all the list there.
So the larger type shows just for that period. If you look it down in the notes, it's annualized there at the bottom, which you can't see probably very well. But it's annualized to $8,654.
Okay.
So yes, the 3642 only gets you through some period of time. Anniversary day is like you said, April 1st.
Yes.
But the annual fee would be $8,654. Sorry about the.
Okay, that's. I just wanted to make sure they were both the same year policy, not a 5-month policy. And
exactly. If you go back to the summary sheet, the summary sheet on the second page, that's the annualized comparative between the two. It is a little deceptive. And I've got the Glatfelter coverage for you if you'd like, but the Glatfelter coverage outlines an annual coverage. This other one, the J Prima, was a little deceptive and.
That was my only question.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question on the commercial general liability. The JPRMIA was $3,000 and Glatfelter was $10,000. What is the difference in that actual coverage? I mean, why would we, if $3,000 is sufficient for our needs, why would we want $10,000?
It's really just a premium decision that's made by Glatfelter because you're dealing with the different.
It doesn't cover us different things?
No, it's the same coverage. It's just a more expensive coverage because it's private insurance.
Go ahead.
Just on the deductible between the two, I noticed it's $5,000 for the general liability and for the public officials. Was that comparable in both? So it's apples to apples?
When we talked to the agent, we asked him to do deductibles the same, so they are the same, yes.
Bear in mind that even if the coverage is the same, because you're dealing with, on one hand, a self-insurance pool, and on the other hand, insurance, there are details involved in that coverage that may be different. For example, the laws that apply to interpreting the contract between you and the insurance company are a little bit more stringent and favorable to you than they are when it comes to a self-insured pool, because in a self-insured pool, you're sort of insuring yourself, and you don't get the benefit of some of those rules. So that's why those are more expensive, I guess. Yeah. If that makes sense. However, I agree with Alan that I think that the self-insurance pool is absolutely sufficient for what you guys need.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Any from the public? Okay, motion?
Let's move it.
Second.
Okay, on. Oh, I'm sorry, Lauren. I keep forgetting.
Director Harrington.
Aye.
Director Gleason.
Yep.
Chairwoman Breeden.
Aye.
Director Griffin.
Aye.
Director Snoke.
Yes.
Okay, the next item is DRI modeling for Brackish Water Group. Who has that?
That would be me. So as the board no doubt recalls, at a prior meeting, you voted to enter into an agreement with the Board of Regents of the Nevada System of Higher Education on behalf of the Desert Research Institute, which we're calling DRI, for use of groundwater modeling that could be used to develop the GSP. Since that time, another organization called the Brackish Water Group has approached us and would like to have DRI. It would be of use to that organization in evaluating the feasibility of extracting brackish groundwater to have the DRI perform some additional work. So you have before you two agreements. They're very brief. The first one is an agreement between the authority and the DRI to perform this additional work that was requested by the Brackish Water Group. And the second agreement is an agreement between the authority and the Brackish Water Group to be fully reimbursed for that cost. The cost is estimated at $53,000, and the additional work is described in the agreement. Any questions?
That all comes from the grant money, correct?
That's my understanding. Their grant money.
That's what I want to make sure, not ours.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So moved.
Second.
Let's have a look, see if there's any discussion. Is there any discussion from the public? Okay, motion? Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah. Lauren, thank
Director
you.
Harrington.
Aye.
Director Gleason. Yep. Chairwoman Breeden.
Aye.
Director Griffin.
Aye.
Director Snoke.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then we are on item number 11, report from the TAC Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I'll try not to overload with some of the stuff that Steve has already mentioned, but we did have a large meeting and went through quite a lot of items that were brought forth for the GSP. All were there except for Michelle Anderson, and then we also do not have a Rand Community Water District representative yet at this time. First off, item number 3, this was the WSM's discussion for the draft GSP sections. All plan areas, basin settings, project and management actions. The modeling schedule and the baseline assumptions, these were reported with the chemistry data, the TDS, and the water quality. DRI was on the phone with their quick update. The baseline model scenario and fate and transport modeling will soon begin. That was already mentioned. DRI will present preliminary results when ready. Future model ad hoc group discussions will be coming, and this will also involve recharge, wet versus dry seasons, modeling outputs over 50 years. There were comments that included the recharge timing, reducing the pumpage, management area effects, seismic zones that may completely affect the flow, and possible model zone changes. In the modeling scenarios discussion, this is moving forward to December and January. Comments included addressing mitigation issues with shallow wells for both small and large private and public. This was part of the TAC discussion. Allocation-based pumpage and distribution concerns discussed. Applicable monitoring scenarios in technical matters will have to be discussed in the future. Navy funding was also brought up and discussed for recommendation. Management scenarios including establishment of minimum thresholds for the measurable objectives that will be part of this modeling. The encouragement of all historical data to help provide thresholds. Construction history and data from private owners would be very helpful. Additionally, the WRM and TAC must nominate projects to answer data gaps to the Groundwater Authority. So there was this formal request to be made for the Navy for funds authorized in the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act. For data gap, ad hoc reporting, the location of missing data is important, but after existing data is properly reviewed. The November ad hoc call dates will be set, and the TSS grant funds must be set before the year's end. Cascade drilling is available, and access agreements must be established with landowners. The data gap budgets and scope review and comments from the Water District request was also done. Monitoring well protocols, the DMS update and discussion was done. Playa-based water compliance issues on the Navy base were discussed. Imported water and GA responsibilities. Input on next steps for imported water was requested by the TAC, including input on whether imported water should be actively pursued now, the roles of large pumpers in obtaining imported water, whether there were any options for imported water that had not been included in the concepts presented to the TAC, and whether this will come forth with an ad hoc committee that will come to either the TAC or the GA board. This should be established, is our recommendation. There were comments that the GA should be the lead on obtaining imported water. The TAC was asked to provide any additional comments to the WRM within 2 weeks. Any comments were sent via email. A larger draft tech memo summarizing information previously presented to the TAC and the imported water concepts that have been developed is being prepared. The allocation summary was given with the meetings information to be provided. This was for the PAC group, and the discussion happened at that time. Item number 4, special presentation of groundwater monitoring technology. This was just mentioned by the gentleman named Lee who did come forward. And the IWV WD board member, Peter Brown, presented Lee Knutson with Well Intel. He provided information regarding his acoustic reel team management. A motion was given that requested Stetson to review and compare Well Intel monitoring capabilities with other technologies, as Steve already mentioned. This water level elevation data can then be used in the GSP and then report back to the TAC in December. The motion was seconded and approved. Item number 5, future TAC items and dates. Those are all set up. The information for ad hoc group meetings, data gaps, and new committees will be set up. Regular TAC meetings will continue based on the POAM objectives. Future meetings, December 6th, January 3rd, and February 7th. For item number 6, for the WRM and TAC announcements or additional comments, no additional WRM announcements. From the TAC side, Eddie Teasdale requested that 5 additional items be included in the December TAC agenda: measurable thresholds, protocol development of measurable objectives, GSP documentation progress, monitoring network progress with suitability indicators, and an ad hoc management area committee. Those were his recommendations. Wade Major also mentioned that 3 deeper 1,000-foot-plus monitoring wells will be used to gather lithological information, further confirming SkyTem results and assess water quality. The scope of work is being prepared and will be submitted to the WRM. No other item comments were made from either any of the leftover members, and we adjourned at 5:05 p.m.
Is there any questions on this item? I attended the meeting, and I have one, and because I can't speak, so now I can speak. The comments that Eddie asked for to be added on, is that something that you think is appropriate and needed, Steve?
You mean these specific
Yes.
specific comments, or in general?
Well, in general, but he was asking for some measurable thresholds and those kind of things. Are those things
Those are part of the GSP, yeah.
that we already have?
Very
and so this
appropriate,
isn't something new that
No.
we're going to add on as as work for you to do?
No, it is not.
Okay, I
No.
thought that.
If
That's
I
why
may,
was
Madam,
wondering.
in essence, Eddie's comments were in these items, possibly, if needed, shifting them forward from different portions within the POAM so that they would be available for us to discuss on the TAC side.
Okay.
If it is helpful
All
to
right.
move forward
I just didn't
for our
want to give
GSP needs.
new work.
Yeah, nothing new.
Because
Thank you.
all of this looked like it was there, so that's why I was concerned. Okay. Is there any other board or staff comments? Is there any public comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Derek Hoffman again, legal counsel for Meadowbrook, and thanks to Adam for a great TAC report today. I just want to highlight a couple points in the report to just, again, illustrate my comments earlier about the need for data on domestic, de minimis, and other small pumpers. And so just, again, drawing your attention to the TAC report here, because, again, the GSA, the Water Resources Manager, and the TAC are all saying it might, well, the TAC is saying we need this data. Okay, if you look at modeling scenarios, the first bullet, modeling scenarios are moving forward in December and January. Okay, that's soon. We're talking about modeling scenarios, modeling different ideas. But again, the baseline is the starting point. We need information for the baseline. The next bullet, comments included addressing mitigation issues with shallow wells. So again, the TAC is saying it's an issue. We need to look at it. The fourth bullet, and I'll just excerpt from here because it's longer, it says encouragement of historical data to help with thresholds should be provided. Construction history and data from private owners would be very helpful. So that's the TAC, again, making that comment. And I believe Eddie Teasdale's comments about those agenda items, he's asking that they be moved up because he sees them as critical on the critical path toward the GSP. Now, I don't want to jump ahead, but it'll save time. I'll maybe withhold comments on the PAC report. But if you look at the PAC report, items bullet 6 and 7, it says technical information is needed.
Can you wait till Donna gives her report on the PAC?
I can. I have 2 comments to make here, and I'll
all right.
come
Donna,
back.
is that okay with you? Yes.
I'm just going to read from the report, and I don't want to overstep, but it says technical information is needed. Data is needed regarding what is the effect of various options on domestic wells. And then it goes on to say many mutuals and co-ops have not responded to letters requesting their well registration. So I bring this again because this is an issue that Mr. Decker and TAC members and PAC members don't have the resources or the authority to go and get. They don't have the ability to go pursue that information or ask for it. It's an item that I believe the board needs to address. Otherwise, that data, which is so important, I don't believe we're going to have it, and it is critical. And I would also just add one final point, which is the messaging here is so important. To say to these smaller domestic well owners that we need you to register your wells so we can charge you a fee in a year and a half, it probably isn't the best way to approach that. But I think registering your wells so we can understand your concerns and help mitigate them in the plan would be a proper and appropriate message that would help you and help us all to get that data. And I'm happy to talk offline about some ideas there. I don't think they're complicated, but I do recognize it requires energy and focus, and I'm asking that the board consider those options. Thank you very much.
Steve, are you, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're not ignoring these directions from staff, from PAC and TAC, are you? You are incorporating them in your search.
Yes, let me, I'll go a step further. I talked before about the work we're doing with Renee at the Water District on identifying non-de minimis wells that we don't currently have. That's ongoing, and Director Gleason asked when we'll have that done. So we walked through that. A logical next step that we've already looked at and we've talked about internally would be to use that same data set, that same information, along with some information, for example, the flash drive we got from Donna and other information we have. The logical next step would be to take that same database information and start looking at de minimis wells. Obviously, it's a bigger effort. As been mentioned here, somewhere between 900 and 1,200. We don't know how many are there, but there's a lot. But since the effort has already been started looking at the same geographic information, the same GIS database, and it will be a much bigger effort than non-de minimis because we're looking at a lot of little stuff. But we believe it could be done. It hasn't been started yet. It hasn't been authorized by the board. It's something that we're not anticipating doing, but coordinating with folks like Renee to work on that. We think that the effort can be streamlined by carving out the de minimis, the non-de minimis wells that we've already identified, carving them out of our database, of our mapping, carving out water district boundaries out of that, and then limiting the areas that we need to look at for other de minimis wells. The work can be streamlined a little bit, but frankly, it hasn't started yet. We need to finish the non-de minimis and get that work completed and documented before we go to that next step. We've always thought it was important from the very beginning. We talked about registering the wells, and we decided not to do that, but we always thought it was important that we include, wherever we can, information on the de minimis wells. We get them in the program too. So it is in the plan. It's not being done right now.
Let me ask a question then. Do you need direction from staff, from the board on any of these items?
I possibly when we get done with the non-de minimis, when we get that documented, which will be, we'll have that done by the next, we're talking about getting that done right away. The urgency associated with going to de minimis wells without doing required registration, the urgency that the board sees for doing that would help we get direction. Not just from us, but also from the support we have from the city and from the water district, because we're using their staff to do this. We're trying to minimize our effort because we've got enough on our plate. But direction of how fast you want to do that, I'm sure will help Don Zadiba on that. I'm sure it will help Ron on that to understand how fast the board wants to start applying efforts in the de minimis wells area.
Is that an item we can put on the agenda? Let's wait until January on that, so we have the new Don and the new water district doing that.
Okay.
But is that inappropriate? Does anyone disagree with that direction? Okay. All right. Sorry, Don, I didn't see you there.
Don Decker. I'm a TAC member representing domestic well owners. The de minimis category, of course, was established by Sigma law, and the conditions and circumstance of that designation, of course, you guys are aware of and are following. At this point in time, there is no legal requirement for the domestic well owners to register. Some have voluntarily done so. The question of well construction is not as obtuse as it might seem. The great majority of domestic wells and the shallower mutual wells in this valley were drilled to American Water Works Association standards. And so we know from wells where we do have construction information, for example, in the Kern County Water Database, that virtually all of those wells, in fact, do have a WWA construction standards incorporated. So if you assume the same for the remainder or the majority of the remainder wells, we actually have a lot more information at this point, which is all we really need to go forward. It's not like we have a huge amount of unknown here. Am I making myself clear there? I submitted to Stetson a week and some ago a report from myself that describes the circumstance and conditions that I just offered to you, and it's now a part of the record. It really should have been part of the tax summary today because it was a step, I think, that is important to recognize that we really do have more de minimis understanding than people have thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to respond, Don's information is very, very helpful. And we did get it even well before the report last week. We've gotten that information. Gene is using that information in our review of these domestic de minimis wells. Also, Donna's information, I mentioned the flash drive. We're coordinating all that to make sure that we're using all of that information to identify as many wells as we can and using the standards that Don mentioned, which are really very, very helpful. So yeah, we're getting a handle on that for several reasons. One of them being impacts to shallow wells, other one also being identification of wells. So yes, we're using that information. So thank you, Don.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other comment on the TAC report? Okay, Donna, could you do the PAC report, please?
Okay. A quorum of 10 PAC members was established at the November 1st meeting. Approval of the minutes of August 2nd were established. Minutes of September 6th are tabled until the next PAC meeting. Item number 4 was our main discussion item. Discussion of pumping allocations and comments regarding uses and users. So I have a bullet list here. I know that there will be more detail in the minutes from the meeting because Renee always does a great job at recording the comments. This was the first opportunity for each of the PAC stakeholder group members to see and review the comments of each group of representatives that met with Mr. Markman and Steve Johnson on October the 1st. Good forum and a good first step. The policy and science side are both developing. The next step might include draft management scenarios, an opportunity for PAC to provide scenarios and allocation themes. The summary is helpful. We need more follow-up meetings. All options need to be equitable for all. Additional discussion should include water rights issues. The summary didn't really delve into that very much. There should be more discussion of options for the DACs and from the DACs. The 2 DAC proposals that are included in the Prop 1 grant funding should be implemented as soon as possible. For example, the Inyokern CSD needs assistance to repair a leak in a storage tank and needs a backup water tank to use while a storage tank is repaired. There was also discussion about how to address doubling of water rates or other proposals for increased costs for residents who have low income or fixed incomes. Technical information is needed, needed regarding what is the effect of various options on domestic wells. Many mutuals and co-ops have not responded to letters requesting their well registration. All wells in the valley should be registered. We can move forward, but ultimately need data from all the wells. Regarding discussion of uses and users that may not have been addressed in groundwater production figures, the IWV brewery was mentioned, well for water, for construction, water use for granite construction, water use for the Horse and Burrow facility at BLM. We learned that the water is provided by the Navy for that facility and would be included in the Federal Reserve rights production numbers. We need to quantify how much groundwater is in storage and the quality of that water. Learn how adjudications and other GSAs are meeting with and working with stakeholder groups. Address quality of life issues. And I provided a copy of the Water Code, Section 1305, which listed beneficial uses of the waters of the state. It will take a number of years before we know exact numbers for recharge and production and have validation data from the modeling numbers and options. PAC members request that we have specific direction from the GA board and the Water Resources Manager as to how the PAC should proceed now with allocation discussion tasks. We would like to have a detailed agenda for our second meeting with Mr. Markman and the Water Resources Manager, Mr. Johnson, scheduled for December the 6th, 2018. And I understand they're not sure if Mr. Markman will be able to attend the meeting on the 6th, but we've been waiting now 3 months. 2, 3, we had the first meeting in September, and the PAC was promised a follow-up meeting for discussion with Mr. Markman after Mr. Markman presented some ideas to the board. So I understand he did that today. So we would like for him to be present at the December 6th meeting. But I suppose that's at the option of the board. We did appoint a vice chair since Steve Goddard had resigned. So the consensus of the members was to ask David Janis to be vice chair. And I talked with him this morning, and he has agreed to do that. Items 6 and 7 for outreach coordination and planning for imported water and for recycled water. Those two items were discussed together. The PAC members reviewed the outline for the communication and engagement plan approved by the IWV GA on April 19, 2018, and available on the IWV GA website. We recommend that the board members and staff reference the CNE plan. It is vital to reach out to every person in the basin. The bottom of page 4 in that plan states that those who are affected by a decision have a right to be involved in the decision-making process. PAC recommends focused workshops scheduled in a meeting venue large enough for expected attendance and held in the evening. These guidelines are on pages 6 and 7. PAC recommends that the members of the Speakers Bureau make presentations on the topics. Materials on the topic should be made available to the public on the IWV GA website with hard copies and access to electronic copies at libraries and other appropriate public places. Present a user's perspective focusing on general concepts such as affordability of the water, supply and demand issues, quantity available, reliability of the source, and the plan from the GA. And many of these suggestions came from a member of the public, Stan Ratora. On a personal note, I have decided not to apply for reappointment as a director for the Eastern Kern County RCD Board. My term is expiring now. I suppose I will continue in place until the new board member is appointed. But at that time, then the EKC RCD, as described in the bylaws, will designate a new board member as its representative on the IWV GA PAC. Even though I will continue to act until the new person's in place, I am planning a trip, and I will be out of town from November 19th through December 27th or 28th. I'm going back east to visit with my daughter and son-in-law. Haven't been back there for a long time. I'm of the opinion that no one person is indispensable. And I'm sure that the other PAC members who I've been working with since the PAC was set up are working together well, and that they will be able to continue to do their work under the direction of a new chairperson. So I appreciate all the PAC members, and I appreciate their diligent commitment and regular attendance at meetings. And I'm sure things will proceed very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Is there board comments or questions on the PAC report?
I had a question. Oh, you're going to go back? Donna, I heard you mention a couple things. The customers' bills doubling, that struck my ear, and I had read something about that, and I asked about that at the water meeting the other night. I would hope that our customers' bills aren't going to double, first of all. But second of all, you had mentioned the attorney, and I'm just curious. I think I'm going to sound probably like the devil's advocate here, but he came to the meeting today and spoke. What would it cost for him to be at those meetings? Is there any idea? Because it seems to me it'd be very expensive for him to attend a PAC meeting.
Yeah.
So,
Mick kind of leaned over and asked that. I would expect the cost for him, if he was going to come, because it was discussed a little bit earlier with Jim, if he was going to come to the PAC meeting, it might make sense for him to attend the TAC too, because he's already driving all the way up here. But I would expect the estimated cost between by $1,500 and $2,000 to have him come to the PAC meeting and possibly attend the TAC also. Yeah.
So what would be wrong with the PAC having a group of questions to ask him when he attended this meeting? And he could answer those questions at this meeting. So it was one meeting instead of coming to this meeting, the PAC meeting, the TAC meeting, and spending $3,000 or $4,000 that month. Yep. That would be my question.
Thanks. Thanks, Chuck. I have the same thoughts. It's a budgetary issue. I mean, we'd love to him to go everywhere and be everywhere, but it's a budgetary issue, and this board are the people that approves the budget. So any decision to have the water lawyer attend the PAC needs to be approved by, I think, but have to be approved by this board. And we can go through that, and we can deal with that issue. On a personal note, Donna, I'm thrilled to hear of your decision that you're moving, going back east to visit folks. I think that's going to be a great time for you. You have done a spectacular job in what I have described frequently as the hardest job in this whole deal, is being the PAC, the head dog on the PAC. And you have done a spectacular job. I'm very thankful of keeping these people together without clearly defined constant objectives and things to do, and somehow you've managed it. I wish you the best. And I'm supremely thankful for your work. And you put a big burden on me now because I got to go find somebody to appoint in your stead. But I just want to say thank you for your great work, Donna.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I just want to add to that too. Thanks for the leadership you've shown on the PAC, Donna. I know it's been a lot of work and a lot of frustration.
I want to echo the same thing, but I'd like to ask a couple of questions. In your questions that you've asked for us, do you think, and I recognize the value of your assistant chair or whatever you're going to call him, because if he is elected to come back up and be the chair, you have long leadership knowledge from both Dave and all of your team. You have a great team in there and a good PAC. But I wanted to ask a couple of questions, and I'm wondering how you think. Okay, let me first ask. How are we going to give them direction, and where are we going with that? Because quite frankly, the direction I thought was coming from you. Is that because they're asking us to give them direction, but I thought it was coming from you. Am I wrong?
We are helping. A lot of times, the structure was set up long before I was here.
Right.
But the structure really is for the board to give the PAC direction. But structurally, it's difficult to do. It's difficult for the board to get together and give them direction. So I've been hearing what the board wants, looking at the TAC, and listening to Donna and some of the concerns they have, and trying very hard to give them not only agenda items, but look forward to several month agenda items. And we don't have any problem doing that. That doesn't take that much effort to help them with those items. Right now, we're focusing, I think, on the allocation process. That's on the agenda. We have items that we've already identified for the next couple of meetings for agenda items, but we're certainly not opposed to the board giving the PAC direction at all.
Sure. Go ahead. Thanks. I appreciate it. Actually, we set it up so that the water resource manager can give direction to the PAC and the TAC, and work closely and collaborate both of them. I think it's been difficult because there is no policy decisions. We're not in the policy mode yet. Right. We're getting there quickly. But there are some really good questions here that they come up. And I think it's in and of itself as a policy that they are trying to get to understand, for example, the need to quantify how much groundwater is in storage and the quality. Several of these bullets they talk about are good points that we need to understand, and we need to get those things moved into a better understanding. So maybe the TAC is assuming these things and outside the purview of the PAC. I don't know if, they already know that. They're probably already working on that. They probably had those numbers, but the PAC is not aware. And so the PAC is trying to come to equal footing with the TAC.
Maybe. So
I think that's the situation. We're in a position where I don't think there's easy tasking for the PAC. I think the water resource manager, as a matter of policy, can direct the PAC to develop ideas and come up with policy recommendations for the board.
I have heard Donna say numerous times, and if I'm overquoting you, Donna, forgive me, but you felt like we were giving you busy work. And you're nodding it, so I think I've heard it enough from you and from the PAC. And I can't imagine how anybody thinks that anything that's coming out of the PAC is busy work. It is the most important. I've said this over and over and over again. You are bringing the technical committee's work to the PAC. You're bringing the GSA's work to the PAC. You're bringing the water manager's report to the PAC. I mean, I can't imagine how anything you think is busy work. If you're just getting busy work, y'all don't need to be doing it. You need to be doing work that helps us develop a plan that runs to sustainability and gives us the process of getting there. I don't know what you are looking for that, other than the questions you've asked here, that gives you any more direction than when we acknowledge, yes, these are good questions. We want staff to present to you, yes, go ahead, do, because you are going to be the end-up mouthpiece of all of us for the PAC. And we will end up making the decisions. Mouthpiece is a bad word, but you will communicate what we've said. So if that's busy work, God bless you for that busy work.
I think, what are the next steps now? Do the various pumping classification stakeholder groups need to meet 2 or so at a time and discuss back and forth and come to some sort of consensus on items? Or, how should we proceed? Should we do breakout groups at our PAC meeting for various of the pumping classes to meet together? And I think we need more input from the public. The public needs to know more about these items that we're discussing as well.
How do you propose that happen?
I guess the focused workshops, I don't know. I think we have been asked to give Steve Johnson and the PAC chair written ideas regarding policies on imported water and recycled water, those two. But we haven't received the full discussion, written out items for imported water as such. We did receive the whole draft for the recycled water, but so far I've only received 2 written comments back from PAC members, which I need now to get out to the other PAC members and to encourage the others to write down their comments as well. Okay. So, I don't know. I guess...
Well, then we will endeavor to continue to try to give you meaningful work, but also give you work that addresses the concerns that PAC and TIP have presented. Nick, did you want to say?
Don, I got one of that's been highlighted to me today is that we don't understand the de minimis user and its full implications on this basin. I would like the PAC to look at the de minimis issue that Mr. Hoffman talked about and our water resource manager talked about, and come up with some policy or some ideas on how best to discover those numbers and develop a strategy to incorporate them into our final plan.
Any other comment? Any other comment from the public?
Judy Decker again. I'm speaking as an individual. I too would like to thank Donna for all of her work and being on the RCD board with her. I know a little bit about how much time it has taken for her to be chairman of the PAC. It is a tremendous job, and that I don't think you as a board or the staff or the public realize how many hours this lady has put into drafting agendas, drafting minutes. Her minutes are always excellent, and it has taken her and Renee hours and hours to do that. And I don't know what the bylaws say about either the TAC chairmanship or the PAC chairmanship, but it seems to me that it is something that should be rotated so that the person isn't under that burden all the time. And I'm going to tell you today, Donna's points she made were really good, but they are points that people, the public, who get together have discussed in this forum. When is the board going to discuss some of these thorny issues, like users and uses and allocations? I was at the PAC meeting when allocations came up, and it was like somebody did something untoward. Everybody backed up in their chair, quite literally, and they sort of closed their mouths and sat there. And there needs to be some outside guidance, as Donna has said, or leadership, not from the PAC committee. They're the people that are going to have the end result. But from you, the board, there needs to be, maybe allocations has been brought up somewhat too soon because you don't have the final results from DRI and of all the models and things. But we feel that you, as a board, should be discussing this in public with the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wes Katzenstein, a member of the PAC. I also want to thank Donna for her world-class leadership. Things get kind of fiery sometimes, and in Donna's quiet way, she brings it forward to you folks in an organized, structured manner. And when we all get frustrated with perhaps feeling like we're not adequately tasked, we share Donna's frustration when she brings that to you. She is truly speaking for us, at least speaking for myself. So I want to thank Donna for that. Secondly, I want to talk about allocations a bit. We were tasked with that, and I think that's one reason that we're all members of the PAC. Speaking for myself, I see our goal is to bring you alternatives for allocation schemes. And we were told we could do that, and we've talked with Mr. Markman, and it was our understanding that he was going to give us guidance on how we might proceed. What is our procedure to discuss allocations? And that's why we all sat back in our chairs. If we don't have that procedure in front of us, then it's going to become kind of a free-for-all, and that's not our intent. Our intent is to work together. So I think we do need, I'm kind of echoing what I've heard from Donna and from Judy, we need guidance on how to proceed to discuss allocations. As far as policy that might come out of that, I think it's very critical now that the TAC is considering management scenarios. To me, that will give you trade-offs. As you make allocation decisions, that will give you the guidance. If you make this decision, here's the impact on the groundwater, and here's the impact on critical thresholds that need to be defined. I think the PAC should be involved in identifying those scenarios, those management scenarios that the TAC would investigate. To me, that would be the key input we could provide, key policy input, if we were given the proper leadership to allow us to address allocation alternatives. And I don't think we'll come up with one grand allocation scheme we all agree upon. I think there would be several that might come out of the PAC. And those should be made available to the TAC to be examined using the model as a management alternative. So that's kind of the frustration I have. That's why we're all here, is to help come up with alternatives. And one third point I want to make is that we continue to be handed the public outreach task, but really that's not our job. No, we're not paid to do that. We're frustrated that not everybody in the valley, everybody in this valley now should have received notification of what's happening here. It's not our job. We're not paid to do that. We have given you guys a document that outlines what should be done. The public should come to our meetings, but we're really not empowered to discuss policy with them. So there is some frustration there too. Anyway, that's pretty much what I had to say. Please give us guidance on how to proceed with allocations so we can provide you alternatives that will help you when it comes time to consider allocations. Thank you.
My name is Sophia Merck, and I would like to personally thank Donna Thomas for all her wonderful work that she has done for this community. She has done an excellent job, not only with working in regards to this, but I know how hard she worked on the Simas station, and she is a wonderful, wonderful person. But I also agree with the last three speakers that the PAC needs more guidance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next item is the General Manager's report. Ron, do you have anything else to add?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then closing comments from the board. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. A little while back, Director Gleason had mentioned independence here for the board. In response to that, I have a letter from the Navy that outlines the transfer of the basins model that we've already shared, but transferring that basin model's maintenance, further development, and configuration management to the GA here. So I'd just like to present that to you all here today.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good.
Thank you, everybody. Wow.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes. Thanks. I think, Donna, well, let's talk afterwards, because I don't think you still got clear direction. And I'm gonna help you get a couple tasks. You got one tasker for me.
Yeah.
And I'd like to let you know how I plan on getting you or how we should go about getting you the assignment and how to shape the allocation discussion or the development of how we're going to develop allocations.
Yes, I would like to include David Janis in that discussion.
Okay, cool. Okay. Also, I think I'd like to talk about having the TAC and the PAC meetings moved to this building in this office so that we can have visuals and audios of all the discussions that happen in the public meeting. Is that possible to do that, or?
Ricka looked at it and said, so Ron, would you share what Ricka, did she share it with you? Ricka, are you there?
I apologize. I didn't share it with him, so I'm over here. The only thing that I looked up was the availability of the building, and nobody uses this facility the first Thursday of every month from 1 to 6 or 1 to 8. I'm not sure, Peggy, what time you said. Was it 1 to 6 or 1 to 8?
That's what I said. You keep at least 8.
But as far as use of it, it needs obviously approval through Ron, through the city manager. But the availability is there, and I can come up with numbers if he so desires, and that's the direction I'm given.
Yeah, the use of the building probably won't be an issue. However, staffing the media room to record this may be an issue. We have 2 IT folks, and it may be significant.
Okay, so I'd like to offer our support in helping overcome that last obstacle. If it's going to cost a couple bucks to get this thing done, the county will weigh in to support that effort. We just have to have that conversation.
Yeah, we can discuss that with staff. I don't know if it's so much the money issue as it is the time issue for staff, but let me work with staff and our staff call, see if we can make that work out.
Okay, I think I would just like to appeal to this board and say that the work that the TAC is doing, we're seeing how important that is. The work of the PAC, we're seeing how important that is. The public needs to have insight into who's saying what and when they're saying it and how they're saying it, and they need to have that information. And right now, they don't have it. If the water district where they're meeting now is going to improve their facilities in terms of audio and visual, fantastic. That answers the mail, and that would work fine. But I just think we need to get off the dime and get that done.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and I am going to ask that at the committee meeting that the water district record audio and video from now on. I don't know that that will get approved, but
okay.
That's what I'm going to propose at our committee meeting.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to say to Rika and to Renee's, whose name was brought up several times today about you doing work in addition to what you already are doing, but I'm hearing reports from the Water Resource Manager that your support is invaluable. So the Water District, thank you very much. And to the city, thank you very much for that in-kind support.
I'd like to say a couple of things. Mick, you and I first talked to Donna in the PAC about the A word, the allocations, and I want to see a procedure developed as soon as possible, whether it comes from our staff or whether it comes from legal, but how they deal with it. And Mick, I'd like to have you and me involved in it if we can. If not, then our direct staff. But allocations isn't a bad word. Allocations is the process under which we look at what are you using, how we use it, given what we have, and it's a collaborative effort. And I don't think I expect PAC at all by to say, okay, you get 1 acre feet, you get 5, you get 7, you don't get any. I don't want that. I want us to discuss the process about how we do that. And I think it's important. And so in that respect, even though I think Mr. Markman is going to cost us a lot of money and I don't want him here for every meeting, I would like to have him here for one PAC and TAC meeting to at least give direction to them and help them make that happen. If we have to increase our budget, I'll go stand out in the street and we'll see if we can get pennies for the public. I don't know, whatever, but something. It needs to be done. I think we need to address the PAC's concern and find some way to do that. I also want to look at how we deal with where we're going, because I hear, Derek, I hear you all the time, and you keep saying, and forgive me, I'm not being combative, but I hear you saying the same thing over and over and over again. I have to think you think we're not listening to you, and that's the reason you're saying the same thing over and over and over again. So anybody who thinks you're not going to listen to anybody doesn't need to be up here. We need board who listens to what people say, understand how we can apply it to what we're doing, and demonstrate that we have done that. And I want us to be able to accomplish that more fully. So if any of you have any ideas of how to do that, I want that. The last item I have, we had a speakers bureau set up, and I've heard you address it, and it was on my to talk about today. It was the water district, the city, and the county to go out and talk about where we are with this agency, what we're going to do, how we develop it. I don't think we were at that point in the past. I think we're at the point where we can speak, and we're not going to talk about we're going to do 1, 2, and 3, but we're going to talk about the general idea of where we're going, how we involve the public, and how we involve staff and the board. I think that's appropriate to kind of do that and look at it now. I'd like us to come up with how we do it and what we say, and understand the liability of what we say when we're not here, out there. Be very careful, because I think we're all going to, our intents are all good. Nobody is going to be out there and trying to say something that isn't going to happen, but I want to see us talk about it. So if somebody in staff and the board can help us do that, and if we want to include San Bernardino and Inyo County, God bless you, come on along. You got nothing better to do. You can come, and if we want to include the Navy, I think it's important that they understand that it's the Navy, the BLM, all of the agencies that are involved in this. So I want us to look at that. How we do that, I'm not even going to try to suggest. Okay, that's the only things I have. Does anybody have any other comments? I'd like to say one more thing. The next meeting, we're debating whether we're going to have it or not because it's on the 20th, is that correct? The 20th. I'd kind of like to hear, unless there's something that must be done that month, that day, 5 days before Christmas, let us know. If you think it absolutely, and we're going to have staff to come back with some direction. So if you truly think there's an item that is time-consuming and necessary for that date, I want to have it, and I want to hear staff's opinion.
Well, I think at a minimum, we're going to have to pay invoices.
Pay invoices? Okay, well, clearly people need to be paid. Okay, I would hate to have a meeting simply to pay invoices. Yeah. Can we do that legally by a voice, a email, a?
Let's have staff take a look at it and see where.
All right. Okay. Other than that, I see no other comment. Thank you all. Hmm?